Welcome to all my subscribers, followers, and listeners out there. My name is Max Harsha, and I'm the host of the Lessons from the Cockpit show. For over 60 years, my passion has been everything aviation, as you can see here behind me. On the Lessons from the Cockpit show, we interview some of the most fascinating and intriguing pilots, aircrew members, maintainers, and aviation enthusiasts from all over the world. We want to hear their stories, but more importantly, what did they learn from being in these extreme and extraordinary military, commercial, and even general and private aviation environments? The purpose of our show is to illustrate how does the aviation world work, but more importantly, increase critical thinking skills both in the air and on the ground. Some of the stories you're hearing on this show are being told for the very first time. This, the 99th episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show, is supported by Wall Pilot, aviation art for the walls of your home, office, or hangar. Go to wallpilot.com and pick from, I think there's 157 ready to print 4, 6, and 8-foot profiles of famous airplanes that you can pull off and stick to your wall, just like the KC-135 you see above me. These are extremely detailed and exhaustively researched profiles of these famous airplanes. We also do custom work. So fill out the sheet. If you want your favorite airplane with your name on it and a particular unit, weapons load, so go to wallpilot.com and buy a couple of these really interesting prints. We also would appreciate going to Venmo or PayPal if you feel like supporting us that way. Just giving a donation, folks. Or, better yet, join my Patreon All Ranks Club channel. Those of you that join at the designated driver and by the bar actually will get some pretty cool stuff. One-on-one time with me, question and answer sessions, Thursday virtual bar night where we all get together and just talk about aviation. And one of the coolest things that we just did is 7-inch stickers that you could peel off, stick on things like your computer, water bottles, and they are dishwasher safe. Let me show you what one of them looks like. Of course, if I'm going to do stickers, we're going to do tankers. Peggy, the KC-46 from the New Hampshire Air National Guard. Also, Vietnam, F-4s, one of my favorite airplanes. F-15E Strike Eagle. This is Claw and Kitty that got 11 drone and cruise missile destroyed on the night of the 13th and 14th of April, 2024. And of course, the Vader Viper, the 64th Aggressor Squadron, black F-16 Viper. And again, these all peel off and can go on any flat surface. And they're really durable, folks. And those of you that join at the designated driver or by the bar will get one of those every month. We're working on the next 15, as a matter of fact. So go to my Patreon channel, All Ranks Club, in the link below and join us. This gentleman reached out to me and actually interviewed me first. And he had such a fascinating story that I thought it was appropriate to put him on. Today, we're going to talk to Max Harsha, helicopter pilot, but also an incredible historian. And he's going to tell us about lessons from flying helicopters and history. So, grab an adult beverage of your choice, sit down, strap in, and let's begin Lessons from the Cockpit show with Max Harsha. Max Harsha, how are you? Welcome to the Lessons from the Cockpit show. I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great, man, because I'm really fascinated by the things that you're involved with, rotary wing and of course, an incredible museum. So, and the first question I always ask all the people that come on, Max, how did you become interested and how did you become a lover of aviation?
Well, the first thing that really got me into aviation isn't even planes related. It actually started with Star Wars. That was my intro to aviation. And for me, the biggest thing, the coolest thing for me was watching pilots and just watching them react to things around them, and the act of flying something around or moving something around in space or even in the air was
Yeah.
just fascinating to me. And that got me interested when I was only 5 years old. And I think even since then, when I was young, I had a lot of aviation toys. My favorite, of course, were the helicopters. I loved the little spinning blades. I loved just spinning them around a whole bunch and making the noises with them and everything. And that was the kicker for me. And then also just being north of Brackett Airfield here in Southern California, we had a lot of aviation going on around us. So constant. And even right now, actually, with Southern California's fires going on, we have a lot of helicopters flying around at the moment. So throughout this interview, if there's anything of a loud noise flying overhead, that's most likely one of the guys going out there to fight the fires. So
Well, and those guys have been doing Herculean work. I mean, not
yeah.
just the helicopters, but the bombers, the fixed wing too, because holy smokes, man, those were just huge fires down there. Oh my gosh.
Right.
And
Yeah, it's phenomenal the work that those guys are doing right now, and as quickly as they were to get into action too, especially because the winds were such a huge factor in this, that once those winds died down immediately, and not just our own firefighters, not just Cal Fire, not just LA County Fire, we had all kinds of services from all over the world come in and support these fires. So it's fantastic the amount of people that came in and immediately went to work on trying to put these fires out.
hey, that brings me to a really good question. A lot of people don't understand the Santa Ana winds. Can you explain that for just a second and what that means? Because everybody, a lot of people here in Utah are like, what are these Santa Ana winds and why did it cause the fire? And I try to tell them it wasn't the cause of the fire, it was a factor of the fire, and they're like going, I don't understand, Mark.
Yeah,
Explain
I
what those
mean,
winds are since you live down there.
certainly. Well, even you should know as well, since you've grown up here. It's definitely something that is a concern, especially in aviation, when you hear that, oh, we're going to have the Santa Ana winds come through. And for someone, I started flying out of Riverside when I first started learning how to fly helicopters, and the little Robinson R-22, which seat weight capabilities for those things were only 240 pounds. So I'm already pushing the weight limit as far as the helicopter's capability is. And whenever anybody asks me, what's it like flying a helicopter? And I say, and when I first started, I always said, well, it's flying a steel tube frame with a lawnmower engine and a carbon fiber casing. That's essentially all the R-22 really is, and it definitely makes it feel that way. So when we get Santa Ana winds that come and blow through, you can get anywhere from 20-mile-an-hour winds up to what we had just recently, a couple weeks ago, was about 60-mile-an-hour winds. So, or 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts that blow through. And where I live, we have about 20 or 30, 40-foot trees that are not only like 50 yards away from our houses, because we're pretty condensed in our area, and those trees are swaying back and forth, and all you're waiting for is a small break or a crack or a branch to fall off one of those trees and crash down on your house, and you lose property. We have a number of power lines, and those trees, the combination of trees and power lines, that's where we start to get real issues, is when those trees start to brush up against those power lines, making those connections between lines that should not be touching, and that causes those fires. And that's when we really get into a world of issues. And I mean, not only just recently, but this past year we had a number of fires and a number of floods. So getting all of those issues almost back to back definitely causes a lot of issues in Southern California. As beautiful as it is, as perfect as the weather can be, there are some natural disasters that do occur here in Southern California.
Oh yeah. And see, as a kid, I remember, you know, walking to school, Thomas Paine Elementary,
Mhm.
and it wasn't that far of a walk, but 50-mile-an-hour winds, 40-mile-an-hour winds, man. I mean, just howling. Okay.
Mhm.
And the really cool thing, Max, was we had an empty field that was lined by a bunch of trees, really tall trees. And
Mhm.
across that was a Marine auxiliary base where all of the helicopters would come fly, the Mojaves uh, helicopters, I mean, I'm talking like in the 60s, okay? And all these helicopters would be flying low over my house and everything and battling these winds and everything. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. But that was kind of my introduction to helicopters, Max, was being on that, being right next to that field, and they had their auxiliary uh, airfield there, and they would come practice um, takeoffs and landings and patterns and everything there. And I got to see all of those early helicopters, like I said, the Mojaves and oh, I can't, the name just escaped me. But it's all these popular, early Cold War helicopters flying over my house at
Mhm.
a couple hundred feet,
Mhm.
you know, and I can still remember a lot of the pilots. They'd have the window out off, and they'd be looking down and everything. Of course, they'd look down at us and wave to us and everything, and that was my early introduction to helicopters.
Mhm.
But you took helicopters a step further, didn't you? You started flying them. At what point did you start flying? And more importantly, what was your first helicopter ride like? What were you thinking when you went up for the first time in a helicopter?
Yeah, well, my first flight was in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
That was when I first really got into flying helicopters. Uh, Even just before that, actually, something that leads up into how I really started getting into actually wanting to fly the aircraft. In high school, I wanted to join the military. That was a
Mm-hmm.
big thing for me. I was part of a Navy junior ROTC program at my high school. I loved it. We got a lot of experience going to military bases, going to academies, Ivy League schools on the East Coast. We had a ton of experience just going around and talking to all these people and career opportunities that
Mm-hmm.
would be available to someone who joined the service. For me, it ended up not being something I was able to really get into. Um, I had a lot of different directions I was being pulled from, working in creative fields where I would design and build or make things for people, to wanting to be an educator and talking to students and educating students. One of the directions was wanting to be a history teacher, so that was also another direction. So I kind of got really confused about what my direction should be. And then after I exited high school, well, actually, you know what? In high school, my senior year, we had to do a senior project. I was part of a nonprofit, small Christian school, and one of the things you had to do was the senior project. The senior project was to shadow someone in a work field, something that would be of interest to you and something that you wanted to possibly experience a little bit more or understand more about how they got there, what did they need, what education, any of that stuff. So you go and shadow this person for 24 hours. You had a required amount of hours you had to receive while shadowing this person and learn about their career field. And I got extremely lucky. I had a substitute teacher who was talking to me about his experience in the fire department, and I was telling him my love of aviation. I want to be a helicopter pilot. I want to go and do this, and I don't know, I don't know if I'll ever get to do it. And he said, "Well, you have your senior project coming up. You need to do this project. I know somebody in LA County Fire who will put you in touch with the chief," because I was a retired chief when he was telling me. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, I'll look into it. And I ended up meeting a retired warrant officer from the Army who was currently with LA County Fire, still is with LA County Fire. And he said, yeah, he'll take you on a couple of flights. You'll go and experience what it's like to be a helicopter pilot. And my senior year was a blast going up with them. Unfortunately, though, but probably also fortunately, I've only gone on one ride along with them when I actually got to go. I got to go on multiple flights with them, but I only got to go on one real mission with them. And it was my last moment I was going to spend with them. It was the last time I had to go and see them. They got a call. And the most interesting thing about it was when they got that call, when the buzzer went off and when the lady came on and started explaining what the mission was about and what the situation was, I didn't even know it was happening because everybody just kind of slowly started getting up, putting stuff on. And I'm asking, well, what's going on? It's like, this is our mission. You're coming with us. I'm like, okay, all right. So threw me in the back of the helicopter and we took off. There was a lady who was injured somewhere near Baldwin Park, and we were going to land in a high school football field. And the entire way we were flying there, the most relaxed gentleman you could have ever expected to be flying into a mission where they're going to be landing in a high school field with a woman who is injured, who's on a stretcher, who needs to be taken to the hospital at USC Medical Center. And just the most relaxed people, just chatting on the radio, asking how I'm doing, how things are going, and what's going on, and just very relaxed. And then we get through the mission. Once the mission actually starts, once we arrived, silence. Just all about what's going on, where we need to be, and what needs to happen. Took her to USC Medical Center, landed on top of the building and everything, and then took our flight back home. And they took a picture of me when the mission was done, and I've got the biggest grin on my face because I was just so happy to be involved in what they were doing. And unfortunately, it took me a couple of years because I graduated 2017, so I'm still pretty young. And graduated 2017, and I don't start actually flying until 2021. So, and then when I get into flying in 2021, the first thing they'll do, we have to go through what's called SFAR 73. SFAR 73 essentially goes through some of the safety requirements to fly in a Robinson R-22, R-44, whichever Robinson training helicopter that you're going to be in. So they go through SFAR 73, teaches you the very basics of what the helicopter is capable of, what it isn't capable of, and the limitations of the aircraft. And then once you've gone through those steps, then you can go and actually be a student pilot and fly the aircraft. So when I went through it, they showed us the original training video that was done by Robinson. And it shows you every possible way the helicopter could crash, striking power lines, tail rotor strikes, low G pushover. They will take you through all of the emergency procedures and explain it in detail about how things could go wrong. And then after that video was over, my instructor came in and says, all right, are you ready? So I was very, very much going from, I love helicopters, I want to go and fly, and then being shown every way this could go wrong. And then being asked, all right, you ready? So it was definitely a mind over matter of like, okay, well, just because these things can go wrong doesn't mean that this could be the reason that it goes wrong today. Or like it's always a question of like, well, if they're so dangerous, why do they still fly them? It's like, well, because it depends on how you fly them. If you fly them dangerously and don't take the proper consideration, of course you're going to run into issues. If you push the limits of the aircraft where it's not capable of doing, you're going to run into some issues. So they took me on my first flight, my intro flight, my discovery flight, and we picked up. It was very interesting going from the Bell 412, which is a four-bladed turbine engine or twin turbine engine helicopter. So a lot of power, a lot of energy in it and everything. So picking up in one of those was interesting to be in a smaller aircraft doing the same thing where basically I could just put my arm out just slightly outside of the aircraft. And then finally taking off and going on my first flight. And right as we get straight and level, she turns to me and says, all right, take the controls. You're flying now. Like, okay, great. First time ever putting hands on the control surfaces and then just kind of sitting there as stiff as possible, just almost death gripping the controls because you don't know what to do with them.
Yeah, you don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. So, and she gave me the controls. She says, all right, you're doing pretty well. You're holding a stable altitude and all this other stuff. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't even know what direction I'm going or how I'm doing it. And she makes me do a couple radio calls just to be familiar with how to press the trigger to talk on the radio. I'm nervous as anyone could possibly be being on their first flight. And we finally get back and land, and she says, you did a lot better than most people would do on a discovery flight. And to me, after going through almost something that feels so nerve-wracking, but you're also so excited to be there, and then being told that you did really well or better than most people would on a discovery flight, made everything click instantly. And that was the motivation to really start to get involved in aviation and make it a career path of mine.
See, that's the power of a good instructor.
Mm-hmm.
It really is, you know. And when I went through pilot training, I had really bad ones and really good ones, you know. And there was two of them that I literally loved going out and flying with, and came home from each flight with these two instructors, absolutely motivated to continue to fly, you know. And it sounds like she was one of those kinds of instructors. So was that your only flight with her, or did you continue flying with her as an instructor?
I did continue flying with her as an instructor. I will say it was a great first introduction. Mm-hmm. As we progressed, it became more apparent about, so I'll say this too, is that motivation of an instructor is either something world building for their students or something completely detrimental to a student. Because you can have a great instructor, someone who knows their stuff, knows exactly what to do, but is motivated by, I just need to build my hours so that way I can get the heck out of here and go and do my job. And that would make them one of the worst instructors possible, because their motivation is to get out of there as fast as possible. And unfortunately, that was kind of her motivation, because she already had experience with firefighting departments and doing transportation to these oil rigs. And she's already traveled the world doing this job. So for her to be, in a way, kind of stuck in this position where she has to make some money and teach students, she had this perspective of that, I just want to get out of here, build my time, get out of here, and go and do something else. I'd rather be somewhere else. And that really, even if it's just in the back of your mind, that will translate nowhere. It will translate to your students, and your students will take notice. And that can really hurt how a student learns. And especially because when you're trying to build that primacy, that first bit of knowledge that the pilot learns, or a new pilot learns, is they need to feel like this is something worth doing, or that when they become a CFI, because in helicopter aviation, there isn't any real other direction you can go. You have to be a CFI. If you want to build time and get to other jobs, you have to work up to being a CFI.
Yeah.
So if you want to do this job, don't train them to be like, oh, this is how every CFI is going to be, so that's how I'm going to be. Now you built up this kind of expectation that they don't need to treat their students nicely, or that they're just there to build time. And that really damages that relationship you want to have and build with your students, because you want them to be as excited about doing this kind of job as you were when you first started. So, because there's a reason why we all decided to spend tons of money in commercial aviation just to learn how to fly one of these things. The thousands of hours or hundreds of hours that you're building just to be here. So don't ruin that for somebody else just because you want to go and do better or newer things.
See, that's a great lesson, man. Be in the moment with your student, you know. And I had an instructor when I went through undergraduate pilot training that was just as you described. Want to be there, and made it apparent didn't want to be there. And finally, leadership said, you shouldn't be on the line teaching students. And this individual was taken off the line. Okay. Because it got worse and worse over time. And, me and my seatmate, Doug, we were struggling through pilot training because this individual, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, fix it. It was, and then I flew with another, I had 3 T-38 instructors that were just fabulous. Matter of fact, one of them, he had the 5 commandments of flying. And Max, they are: rule number 1, fly the jet. Rule number 2, instruments are your friend. Rule number 3, trim is like breathing. Rule number 4, radio calls do not generate lift. And rule number 5, above all else, sound cool on the radio. And here it is, 40 something years later, and I still remember those.
Wow.
I still remember those, Another one, we had a red tail hawk go down the right engine. He had the airplane, came around, he was great to fly with. And he had come back from B-52s. And then another one who was absolutely fabulous, my main instructor in T-38s. Just so highly motivational, hey, you're doing great. This is, you got to fix this. We got to, work on this, busted me when I needed to be busted because I did something stupid, but still, great to be with. And, unfortunately for him, got F-15s, his dream job, got to his dream location and had been there about 6 months. And, one side of his body went numb while he was flying.
Wow.
They found out he had MS. He landed, he had MS, and later passed away from it too, which is a tragedy. But man, when I became an instructor pilot in the Air Force, I tried to be as highly motivational and as instructive as I could, excited about my job, even when you're not too excited with flying with the student you're flying with. And I'm sure you know what that's like.
Yeah.
But yeah, the instructor can make all the difference in the world, because we had a lot of people, that just hated going through UPT, and it was because of the instructor. And as soon as they made an instructor change, life was good. Life was really good. So you continue flying, and I'm assuming that you're a certified helo guy, a helo pilot now, right?
That's right. Yeah. So now I'm commercially rated, currently working on my certified flight instructor license. So I'm not a CFI just yet, but I'm currently working on that at the moment. So that's why training, or learning how to train, currently going through what we've referred to as FOIs, or fundamentals of instructing. So, which is extremely important. It's something I've been looking forward to as someone who loves education first. And it's one of the most exciting parts of getting to be an instructor, is being able to transfer that knowledge from what you've learned through experience and from what's been taught to you, and you get to translate that to someone new, someone who's never been experienced or never been exposed to or experienced aviation in their life. And it's one of the neatest things, because I remember those moments going through my private of learning those skills and getting that aha moment. And that's one of the best feelings. One of those experiences, and every helicopter pilot knows, and I've asked my instructors, and they were like, yeah, I remember that moment, is when you learn how to hover. Hovering a helicopter is one of the most unique things you get to do in aviation, especially with rotorcraft aviation. And it's something you learn first on when you start flying, is you learn how to hover the aircraft, because it's one of the first things you have to do in order to get off the ground. And those first couple hours are struggles, and that will make or break your motivation of whether you want to continue flying or whether you just want to stop doing this and move on to something else. It's definitely it's an experience. So my first couple hours, we practiced hovering, and I could not get it for the life of me. I couldn't understand it. It didn't make sense to me. Left pedal and right pedal, pulling or lowering collective, moving the cyclic, going through those motions and not understanding how they're all linked together, that one affects the other. You put a little too much left pedal, you got to add more cyclic. If you put too much right, you got to lower. And just maneuvering the aircraft, because there's so many things going on. You have a tail rotor, you have a main rotor, you've got dissymmetry of lift, you've got all these factors, torque, you got all these factors that are affecting the aircraft all simultaneously, and you're supposed to keep the aircraft in one spot, unmoving. And it was nerve-wracking for me, because the first thing I do is try to think through it. So I keep thinking, okay, well, if I do this, I need to do that. And I have to think about it. And I kept hearing my instructor like, stop thinking. Just stop thinking about it. Just do it.
You're overthinking this.
Mm-hmm. And I absolutely 100% was overthinking it. And it was after about 3 hours of practicing. The first 3 hours I did practicing autos, or practicing the hovers. And I went home after my third hour. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I'm so worn out from coming in and being told I'm overthinking it, and I'm trying to think through it, and I'm watching videos, and I'm going through ground classes about understanding it, and I'm just not getting it. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I said, you know what? 1 more hour, 1 more lesson, 1 more class. Let's see how I do. If I can't get it, or if I'm not doing better, I need to start thinking about some things. And I went back a couple days later to do my next lesson. Got in the aircraft. We do the startup procedures. We're kind of in a small confined area where our parking spots are, our helipads are, and start up everything. And what she had been doing with me has been doing the initial pickup and takeoff, and we'll land over at a spot that we'll go and practice, where we're not in the way of other aircraft. So that was the process, and I was used to that process. I knew, okay, she's going to take controls, she's going to move us over to a spot, and I'll be safe. We did the startup procedures, we got everything set up, and she says, all right, pick up. I was immediately shocked. I was like, all right, hold on. There's a building next to us.
Wait, what?
There's a chain link fence. There's helicopters behind me. There's parked fixed wing aircraft in front of me. And I had that initial shock of just everything running through my brain about how something could go wrong. And I took that, I shoved it all in a box, I closed it. I said, okay, just do it. Because she thinks I can do it, I can do it, I'm going to do it. And then I did it, I picked up, and I'm sitting in a perfect hover. Like I've been trained like this the entire time. She looks over to me and she says, why haven't you been doing that before? I'm like, I don't know, I'm sorry, I just...
Your aha moment.
I needed that moment where I didn't have to think about it anymore, and I could just do it. And I did it, and I proved to her that I could do it. And that was the click in my mind, like, oh, I can actually do this. And that was the first step into when I really think I really started stepping into like, oh, I can actually do this. And that definitely inspired me to keep going, because I already felt like that was going to be my make or break moment anyways. I was already ready to not do well or just learn slowly, but all of a sudden the first thing we had to do was me pick up, instead of just going through the process of being in my safe spot, exactly where I could be, like I wouldn't damage anything or freak out at all. But no, she wanted me to do it right off the bat, and I did it. And she believed in that. And as bad of an experience there was in certain cases, she wasn't, I would say, not a great ground instructor, but definitely we did a lot better in the air. Yeah. And I learned a lot better in the air from her. So, yeah, I mean, for students, you don't get to really pick who within your local area is going to be a good instructor, especially if you don't even know what you're supposed to be looking for. And that's a difficult decision. And I had a conversation with a kid recently while I was teaching at the Planes of Fame Museum. I was doing a presentation on carrier landing operations, and the kid was asking me a whole bunch of questions about aviation, was getting into fixed wing. And he was asking me, like, or I was asking him really because I was curious about what he wanted to do. He's from Northern California, wants to do aviation, found a local school, and I was giving him like, hey, that's great. You're interested in aviation. Go and do a discovery flight. Here's what to expect from it. Like giving him as much information, knowing that even if the instructors there may or may not be good with him or good for him, that always keep that door open. If it's something you're interested in, keep going. Because like if that's something you're motivated to go and do, that's a passion, that's something you want to do as a career, keep doing it. Like it's a great opportunity to be a part of aviation. There's so many jobs available right now for aviation related fixed wing and helicopters.
Oh, yeah, lots.
Mm-hmm. So even if you don't even go through, even if you don't become a pilot, just being in engineering and engineers, aerospace, all of that stuff, there are companies who are very interested, very open to different opportunities available to all kinds of people from different walks of life. And it's a fantastic opportunity. I love being in this era right now because how aviation is going. I wish I could have been there in the early days when aviation was starting, because that's the topic I usually talk about, the historical aspect. But
Yeah,
right now,
we're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Max, I got to tell you something. Okay,
mhm.
I used to work at Rockwell Collins, which makes the cockpits for the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, this 160th SOAR,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
we had a simulator that they put in a cargo container. All right,
Mm.
that our company made,
Mhm.
because when guys were deployed, they needed to get sim time and do emergency procedures and all that kind of stuff. And these 160th SOAR guys that were working for our company figured out, hey, if we put this simulator full visual, no motion, but visual and everything, in like a cargo container and all the stuff that needs to run it, we can just pack this around. And so I got to fly an MH-60. Uh, and I agree with you, brother. I could fly the helicopter, even though I'm a fixed wing guy, and I had like I said, a very experienced helicopter, 160th SOAR guy sitting with me. I could do formation and landings and taxiing and all that stuff. I couldn't hover worth crap. Okay. And he just says, okay, Mark, just keep it over the numbers, man. And I was freaking everywhere. And I said, Greg, why is this so hard to do? He says, this is one of the hardest things we do in a helicopter is hover. Okay. Low to the ground, high above the ground, whatever you want. It's just extremely difficult. And I thought, how can it be? And of course, being a fixed wing guy, it can't be that hard. I mean, I just flew through a bunch of canyons in formation behind another one. Okay.
Mhm.
No, I failed miserably, Max, miserably. I was all over the place.
Mhm.
So when you talk about hovering and what goes into it, how hard it is, I know exactly what you're talking about
Mhm.
from flying this simulator. Okay. And we were in Afghanistan. The surroundings was Afghanistan. It was Bagram Air Base. Okay.
Uh,
And of course, it's got these big runways and big helipads and everything like that. I could not keep that helicopter in one spot. Backwards, forward, sideways, up, down, and he says, okay, let me have a stick and just watch me. Okay. And he was, like you said, he was moving rudders, cyclic stick, control stick, everything. Okay. And I don't think he moved 3 inches from the spot that he was hovering on.
mhm.
Okay. You take it, and I was like 60 to 80 feet all over the place. Okay.
Mhm.
So when you talk about hovering and how hard it is, brother, I'm right there with you, because we spent about an hour in the simulator And he was just demonstrating a normal mission at night through the mountains of Afghanistan that the 160th normally did in an M860. And I had no problem staying in formation, with another helicopter. I could fly in formation. I could judge, speed and altitude, movement, all that kind of stuff, taxiing, even landing. Okay. I couldn't hover to save my butt. And so when you talk about how frustrating it is, and these guys telling me, and other 160th SOAR guys that I've had on the show saying how hard it is to hover, brother, I'm right there with you. I was so frustrated. And of course it got worse because I was getting in my own head, and he told me that because he had been an instructor in the 160th SOAR in M860s. He goes, dude, you're overthinking this. Dude, you're overthinking this. Okay. Quit overthinking this. And toward the end, he was even laughing at me. He goes, it's a good thing you only fly fixed wing, man. Okay. I'll take you on a mission, but I'm not gonna let you hover. So I totally can testify to what you're talking about, how hovering is a very difficult skill to learn when you're going through rotorcraft training. Typical pilot too, fixed wing guy like me. Oh, I can do this, and of course he's coaching me through everything, and throttle and cyclic and rudder and all that kind of stuff and everything like that. But we spent 30 minutes on hovering, and during that 30 minutes I was everywhere. I mean everywhere. So that would have been a real aha moment for me if I could keep it over and he just said, keep it over the numbers over the runway, the numbers on the runway, that's a pretty good, those runway numbers are pretty good size. Nope. I was over the runway. I was over the grass. I was everywhere. So do you have a commercial, you have your instrument rating also?
I do, yeah. Half of my instrument rating was done in sim. So we had a trailer with the screen and everything and a little computer monitor dash for our instruments. And so half of my experience in instrument was either under the hood, which is these boggles we call it.
Yeah.
And they're all blanked out. Yeah. They were blanked out, and we had a little slot cut out of them so you could only see the instruments. You could cheat a little bit if you really wanted, but I mean, I always took the approach of like, well, if I'm going to cheat, then why am I working on instruments? So we did that. But the instrument training in the sim, you couldn't cheat. They'll blank out your screen, and the only thing you'll actually have is your instruments. So we could do simulated actual IFR conditions, and just looking at your instruments, which were these. We were operating on a much older system, so I'm watching pixels move up and down than I am watching needles and actual instruments. So it was a little bit difficult here and there, but you got used to it after a while. And I could shoot approaches, I could do all that stuff. I could do pattern work and load procedures and everything on the Garmin. I could do all of that stuff in the sim, and I was doing well on my actual flights. So definitely doing instrument in a helicopter was one of those kind of interesting things that you learn as a helicopter pilot, because when my DPE, my examiner came in and did my test, one of the first couple of questions he asked me, or the first question he asked me is, would you take this helicopter to fly in instrument conditions? And knowing better and actually being told by my instructors, these helicopters aren't instrument rated. Mm-hmm. None of these helicopters, not even the ones that have the right equipment, are instrument rated. So when he asked me, would you take this helicopter in instrument level conditions or even in IMC? I said, no, I wouldn't do so. He's like, that's the right answer because none of these helicopters are instrument rated. Would you take a different, much more capable helicopter into instrument conditions? And I said, no. And he's like, that's the right answer, because helicopters are not designed to be in prolonged instrument level conditions. They are to break through clouds and move on, but they're not designed to be to go through IMC, to go through IFR conditions. It's just not built for that kind of condition. Now, Southern California, if we have IMC conditions or IFR conditions, it's not a huge deal because we're low enough to sea level altitudes. It doesn't get cold enough here. There's a number of things that a turbine engine can do that's much more capable than a piston engine. So we're not as concerned in a lot of those cases, but even still, you wouldn't really want to go and fly in those kinds of conditions in a helicopter. So one of the situations he brought up to me, which has been brought up to me ever since I started flying helicopters, is, so what happened with Kobe? I'm like, all right, well,
I was just thinking that very same thing.
Mm-hmm. So, and here's an interesting thing. My examiner, who works very closely with Robinson, the helicopter company that manufactures, who's actually local. They're in Torrance. Mm-hmm. So being so close to a helicopter manufacturing company and also flying their helicopters is also very beneficial. Robinson's been known all across the U.S. and across the world.
Oh, you see them everywhere. You see them any airport that has a training facility for helicopters, it's the Robinson R-22s. I have them here all over. Mm-hmm. Anyway, back to Kobe, because I know what you're going to tell me. You and I talked about this.
Yeah,
this is a great story, and I appreciate you telling this story. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, it was very important to me when he told it to me, because my examiner, when I was doing my instrument exam, was actually one of the instructors of the pilot who crashed. And as unfortunate as that situation is, something that's been explained to me by multiple instructors who've trained CFIs have told me that understand that aviation is not all perfect and pretty and everything goes right 100% of the time. That's impossible. You are going to have situations where you have friends, family members, or people that you knew and grew close to that are going to end up in accidents in situations. And it's really unfortunate when it does, and it can be very unexpected. But it's the same way as driving on the freeway. To compare it to really anything, I think it's more dangerous to drive on the freeway than it is to go up in the air. But it is something that we take a lot of consideration into, because who knows if one of the students that I end up training, and that's why I said at the beginning here, was taking a lot of consideration into the people you're giving knowledge to as a CFI, is you don't know what's going to happen to them when you're done training them, because you're not going to see them all the way through the end of their career. You might make a good couple of friends here and there throughout your experience as a pilot, but you don't know where any of your students are going to go. And if they end up on the front page of a newspaper because they crashed, part of your flight training becomes, or part of your experience and part of their experience, because you had a hand in training them, starts to come into question, whether that is due to legal issues or something that you personally start to put on yourself. And I mean, it's not to say that it will happen, but it is something to be aware of, because it's definitely something that, I mean, I've had instructors who have told their instructors, like, yeah, that's not going to happen to me. One of the situations was, yeah, I'm never going to overspeed the engine. I'm never going to put the RPM above 110%. And it happened. And it was one of the worst days of their lives, because they thought it would never happen. And that's when it becomes an issue. And that's when it becomes one of those hazardous attitudes that's even mentioned by the FAA and is constantly tested throughout your entire experience as a pilot, is hazardous attitudes towards basically neglecting the process of either inspection, training, or just going through your checklist and going through startup procedures. You can forget something just gets put off to the side. So those are definitely issues that come up. But in the case of my DPE that I had when I was doing instrument, he was talking to me about his experience with his student, which was the gentleman who passed away with Kobe, and in that flight was telling me about decision making. And that decision making process of whether you go up and go fly, or you stay on the ground, you come up with alternate plans, or you go and do something else because of the conditions that are available around you. And he told me too that the pilot that got into that incident already knew the area, was familiar with the marine layer that comes in from the coastline that comes right in inland, knows exactly where that line ends due to the mountain range, and should have known better to go and do something else, to make an alternate plan, or simply not go and fly whatsoever. And he made it a very poignant question throughout my entire ground session for my exam, that making the right decision to stay on the ground, to make sure that you're safe. You go through your I'm safe acronym, which is making sure that you yourself are personally in a good mindset to go out and go fly. Whether it's something of your own personal issues, whether it's something to do with weather, whether it's something to do with maintenance, whether you saw something, whether it's in the maintenance logs or something you saw on the aircraft itself, making the decision, because as pilot in command, as required by the FAA, you are the final decision maker whether you go up and fly or not. So if you make the wrong decision, you're to blame as part of that, because you didn't check the aircraft properly, or you didn't look through the maintenance logbooks, or you didn't check weather. There's a number of things that you are responsible for, not just yourself, but also the people you go with, the people you take with you, the cargo you're carrying, and the aircraft and all of the people on the ground. You're responsible for quite a bit, not just yourself, not just to go and joyride. So it's definitely, it's a lot to consider. Not to take all the fun out of aviation simply for all that I'm mentioning, because aviation can be fun, and it is fun. I still love everything as much as I know about and have experienced in certain situations that are or could be considered dangerous, and probably situations that I will end up in later on in a career path, or as far as a CFI, that could be issues later on. That aviation will still always be fun, 100% to me, because it's something very unique. It's something I've always wanted to do and enjoy, and still enjoy and will enjoy, no matter how many accidents or kind of scary situations I've been through. It's still something I always want to go and do tomorrow, or do today, right now. I'd rather be flying right now than standing around on the ground.
Yeah.
So
Understand completely.
mhm.
So did that instructor get interviewed as part of the National Transportation Safety Board investigation into the crash?
I'm not sure. I didn't really expand too much on that
Yeah.
conversation. I will say, though, he was a very well-educated gentleman. He still works with Robinson. He's currently one of their safety pilot and test pilots for the company.
Yeah.
Very extremely knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Great head on his shoulders. He's an older gentleman, but
Yeah.
he's a wealth of knowledge. I
Yeah.
trusted him with my flight. I never drew any concerns between, well, if you were the guy who trained Kobe's pilot, then that's an issue. That was never a concern of mine. He is an extremely knowledgeable, especially even to be hired as a test pilot for Robinson themselves.
Yeah.
Is an extremely good a good indicator that he is a very well-rounded instructor and very knowledgeable pilot.
Yeah.
So I trust him. I trust him very much. But yeah, for him to speak on that situation that I've been asked so many times, that I really never cared that much to investigate too in-depthly, just because it wasn't some, I already understood that it was due to pilot error. And unfortunately, with a lot of aviation accidents that occur across the country and across the world, is usually due to pilot error.
Yeah.
And
such a tragedy too, because it could have been avoided.
Absolutely.
You
It
know,
definitely could have been avoided.
and having, seen parts of the report and everything like that, I mean, they were going almost full speed into the mountain,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I remember that day because I was at church, and somebody pinged me, texted me and said, "Hey, Kobe Bryant just was killed in a helicopter accident," and what a tragedy, and what a shame that that happened. He did so much for the NBA, but also so much for the people around him,
Mm.
and was truly a a gentleman of his word, and helped a lot of people. One of the greatest basketball players that we'll ever see. And and what a tragedy. And I find it fascinating too, because you can go to Flight Radar 24 right now and look at the hills, the Palisades and everything, and the mountains where he crashed. And there's
Mm.
helicopters flying all over him right now, trying to douse the fires and do all kinds of work up there, and anyway,
Mhm.
it's such a shame that that had to happen. And like you said too, there are so many hundreds of things that can go wrong at any given moment. I've had an emergency in the tanker, Max. I seriously didn't think we were going to get back. We are going to make it back to Honolulu. It wasn't covered in any of our manuals. We had no emergency procedures for it. We had a bleed duct failure under the floor that started the wood floor on fire.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the only reason we found out the floor was on fire was because one of the crew chiefs saw the paint bubbling on the floor, and 7 years before it had the same problem. How fortunate was I to have a crew chief that recognized that and knew what was happening, because I would have never looked at the floor. And again, you get in that emergency situation. And fortunately, I was flying with a good crew, and we made it back. But man, that was one of the truly moments and truly in my career where I was really scared I wasn't going to make it home. I'm not going to make it back to see my kids and my wife, and we did, anyway. Now I want to switch a little bit. Let's start talking about your history brain. Okay.
Yeah.
You have been involved in aviation history at probably one of the greatest places to go visit history, particularly in California. Hopefully the fires haven't affected the area down there, but you work a lot with the Planes of Fame Museum and are associated with a lot of the history there. Talk to all my listeners about what it's like. First of all, talk to my audience about how did you develop this love for aviation history. And I've seen pictures of you, dressed in all the garb and the uniforms and everything like that. I mean, you truly live the history like these Civil War Gettysburg guys.
Yeah.
How did you develop a love for that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, history has always been something of an interest of mine since probably middle school. I started studying World War II, and that got me really deep into the weeds about the battles, the uniforms, the countries involved. I really got into the political aspects of how you can convince countries to do certain things. There were a lot of factors that got involved into that, and my grandparents on my dad's side. I mean, from both sides of my family, we had a lot of military members go through World War II, through Korea, Vietnam. So we had a lot of military history throughout both sides of my family. But through my dad's side, I had a great uncle, or great grandfather, kind of part of the family related, but didn't marry into the family. I still refer to him as my great grandfather because he's related to the family in some way. He's been around the family long enough that I'd consider him so.
Yep.
So he's not my paternal great grandfather, but he's close enough. Who fought in World War II. He was part of what was called the 117th Cavalry Recon Squadron Mechanized, which was an M1 Sherman tank organization that was developed specifically to recon for Patton's tanks through North Africa, Italy, and then into Germany via France. And he got all the way up. He went through North Africa, Italy, France, and unfortunately died about 150 miles from the border of Germany. Mm-hmm. So he was close, but not close enough. But when he passed, a lot of those things were brought back to the United States, and a lot of contraband was brought back to the United States and was gifted to my grandfather. And he passed those items down to me, along with my great-grandfather's Purple Heart and some pictures of him. So that really inspired my interest in history. because now I got to actually see and hold physical artifacts that belonged to the era and even in my family's own personal history. And I kept getting gifts like that from other people I would study things about. I have a B-29 clock, the clock that would be on the dashboard and everything, which I've been told that is possibly radioactive due to the glowing filament in the needles. So that's also
interesting.
so now that stays in a box away from my headboard, which it used to be next to my headboard, next to my clocks. So it was like getting those items, getting artifacts like that really started to inspire me to study more about history, because it was becoming more and more of something I really liked doing even after school. I hated learning about history in school, but I loved studying history on my own. And I'd spend hours just looking up YouTube videos or watching documentaries. My favorite show in high school growing up was watching Hogan's Heroes. I would watch all the episodes of Hogan's Heroes, and just I loved it. And even getting to converse with the last living member of the original crew of Hogan's Heroes. His name was Robert Clary. It's the little Frenchman.
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah, the
And
Frenchman.
he has a
They called him the
Holocaust
Frenchman.
story.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he's got a Holocaust story while he was in France during the war. So I got to converse with him because he was a local member and part of the Museum of Tolerance in LA. So it was really cool to be able to converse with him back and forth and ask him some questions. But what really got me into presenting and talking about history, I started doing presentations in high school. And because I went from just learning about it at home to like, oh, well, my history teachers are taking notice, and they want me to do a presentation, a bigger presentation, or take up a whole class time to talk about a certain topic. And I would do that, and I did that from junior and senior year, and then after high school, I actually started working as a staff member for my school as an office worker, and I would still do those presentations. So I've been doing historical presentations, or what we've been referring to now as living history, where you put on the uniform and you speak from either a third or first person's perspective. And I've been doing that since, say, 2016, 2017. So I've been doing those presentations. And I've gotten multiple opportunities from different areas. I've done presentations from Revolutionary War. I've done presentations in the Civil War, so I know exactly how it feels to dress up in the full wool get-up and everything. And to even take that a step further for Civil War, I've done touring documentaries where I spent 6 weeks. We spent 6 weeks touring the southern states, going to different battlefields and filming on location in uniform and talking about our perspectives as we were there on the field, because of the characters or the caricatures that we were portraying of the individuals who were actually there. So I've gotten some really unique opportunities doing documentaries. There's an episode on the Discovery Channel that they did filming at an event that I was at. So I passed through the background, not one that they interviewed, but I passed through the background of a Discovery Channel episode. And then World War II was really the first stepping stone into living history. And I've gotten multiple opportunities. I first started with reenactment groups that are local to our area. Primarily, I got involved with them because I was inviting them to the presentations I was doing at my high school, because I wanted people dressed up for the event. And I didn't want it just to be me, because people knew me already. They already knew me at the high school. So I wanted someone else to also be there, so that way it didn't look too weird, or they wanted to actually see someone who also knew something about it. And then I just kept going to events with them at other schools, at other public events, meeting veterans, and finally getting involved with Planes of Fame. And working with Planes of Fame has been a real treat. It's been phenomenal to work with not only Planes of Fame, but also places like Lions Air Museum, the USS Midway in San Diego, working with the USS Hornet in Northern California, working with another fantastic museum, though kind of out in the middle of nowhere, is Fagan's Fighters Air Museum in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
like some really great opportunities that have come up to me
I've never heard of
in
that museum. Fagan's.
Fagan's Fighters Air Museum in Fall Creek. I believe it's Fall Creek, or Minnesota. But
Okay.
they're a fantastic museum, and it's family run, family owned and run and operated. Their chief pilot is the son of the owners. So and they just recently, they were in the news I guess now a year ago, that they finished up their SB2C Helldiver, which is one of, will soon be three SB2C Helldivers still flying. So the first one was out of Texas. The second one is now theirs. The second to fly is theirs. And the third Helldiver to fly is going to be out of Colorado Springs with the National World War II Aviation Museum. So
I've been to Oshkosh, and
Mhm.
the commemorative Air Force, I think from Texas, brought one in. Okay.
Mhm.
That thing is big,
Mhm. Oh yeah.
and I remember they called it the Beast,
Mhm.
and I thought, how did it get that nickname? How did it get that nickname? Okay. That is a big carrier airplane,
Mhm.
right? And the Avenger is pretty good size too, but
Yeah.
the Helldiver was really big,
Mhm.
really big. Okay. And the Hill Air Force Base had their air show last year, and they had a B-26 and a couple of other really classic airplanes come in, and oh my gosh, had an Avenger come in,
Mhm.
just a beautiful airplane. Okay. So, hey, I want to put in the description notes, um, of course, how do people contact you for speaking events? And we'll talk about that toward the end, and
Mhm.
so that all my listeners and anybody that would like you to come, and discuss history, can contact you. But uh, as far as World War II, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, is there a particular person, or let's say person first, event second, that that is like your favorite, that you love talking about? Who is that person, or what is that event?
Ooh, I don't know. This one's a little tricky because I personally, especially when I do presentations on say, I mean, my main focus for World War II and what I do primarily for Planes of Fame is naval aviation during World War II. So when I talk about naval aviation, I don't talk about specific battles. I don't talk about specific individuals. So when someone comes up to me and says, uh, who was it? I think it was Reagan. When they talk about Reagan, or one of the presidents, and they ask me questions. Oh, hey, do you know this person, or did you know about the story about this person? I'm like, I'm not familiar. I know the story. I'm familiar with the story, but I play into well, we're just aviators. I don't know future presidents. I don't know what's going to happen 20, 30 years down the road.
Yeah.
That's not my field. Uh, so when I go over topics, I definitely speak as a pilot, which
Mm-hmm.
gives people a lot of a different perspective on uh, what they really expect out of a person dressed up from the era. Because a lot of times people will do like MacArthur, or they'll do. Uh, I mean, coming from the Civil War, you get Lincoln. Coming from Rev War, you get George Washington, or you get Benjamin Franklin, and you know that they're there to play up the caricature of these individuals, of what it would be like to meet the actual George Washington or the actual Abraham Lincoln. And for me, because I'm not dressing as an individual in history, they don't come to me with questions about who I am, or what I'm, or like with any real specific questions about me as an individual. And I enjoy that because it allows me the freedom to culminate the knowledge from all across naval aviation in the Pacific, than to just narrow it down to a single individual's experience in a battle. So as much as I would want to answer and say that I have somebody in mind, I would probably say it's only the people I've met. and I've met a naval aviator ace from World War II, and he was a fantastic gentleman.
Who was that?
He was all, oh goodness, I'm trying to remember his name. I did meet him at Fagan's Air Museum. I have his book
Yeah.
in my bookcase here, so I might go and grab that just so that way I can say the name properly, or that way I can give him a proper shout out because he did write a book and it's in there. But fantastic gentleman. I loved talking to him. He was sharp as a tack when I met him. He was making jokes while we were there. Even though he was in a wheelchair, but he was all smiles. He was all excited about being there, and also seeing me in my equipment, all of my gear and everything. He took one look at me and smiled and reached his hand out and shook my hand and was just all smiles. And he was just a really cool gentleman to be with, and he was all excited that we were there to talk about aviation and his aircraft. And it's one of those things that we get a very unique opportunity, very rare opportunity to meet with veterans and individuals who we represent. And that's one of the best parts about what we do is
I got to meet a World War II Korean War ace, and actually I interviewed him, Royce Williams, Navy Navy pilot. Okay, got 4 MiG-15 kills on one mission in a snowstorm. Lives in Coronado, still alive, 99 years old. He came to the last Tailhook convention, and that was the first time he and I got to meet face to face. And you know what? It's interesting because all these gentlemen are like you described, okay? Humble, approachable, love talking about their stuff and everything, you know. And Royce was in his little, scooter and everything, running around, 99 years old, talking to all these people. Just a fantastic gentleman, you know. Flew Corsairs and Bearcats in World War II, F9 Cougars or Panthers in the Korean War, which he, got his kills in. Then was an air wing commander in 65, 66, Vietnam, flying F4s. I mean, just an incredible career, just a wonderful gentleman, you know. So, and you talk about naval aviators, and I think there's two naval aviators I would love to go and meet. There's two naval aviators from World War II that I would love to stand in front of and just talk to. David McCampbell and Dick Best.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
Dick Best because of Midway, obviously, and the things that he did there. And David McCampbell, Medal of Honor winner, lands with like 6 gallons and 6 bullets in his airplane as Hellcat, you know, defending the carrier from 50 planes that are coming in, and he and his wingman shoot down a whole bunch of them. Because I've had an interest in naval aviation too. It's funny because I'm in the Air Force guy, but I have 10 cats and traps on 8 aircraft carriers as a KC-135 guy, which is really unusual, obviously. But my master's degree, Max, is in air warfare, and I actually had classes on the naval air campaigns in the Pacific. That was the whole class, and it was taught by a guy who flew P-38s and Hellcats and warbirds, which made it really fascinating. And he had met Dick Best and David McCampbell and spoke very highly of them. There's so many incredible stories from World War II and naval aviation, the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, all these different things that, Battle of Midway, which really turned the tide of the war so early, and matter of fact, I did an illustration of Mitsuo Fuchida's B5N2 Kate that he was flying in during the Pearl Harbor raid, which is on my Wall Pilot website. You can buy 4, 6, 8 foot, but you studied a fascinating piece of history, World War II naval aviation. And what's interesting is a lot of those tactics that they developed, is what they're using now against drones and cruise missiles, because basically kamikazes were drones and cruise missiles, obviously the technology has gotten a lot more sophisticated, and they didn't have missiles shooting things down. But anyway, next question I wanted to ask you is, your connection with Planes of Fame, and to all my listeners out there, subscribers on YouTube, you have got to go to the Planes of Fame Museum. It is a fascinating museum. They've got incredible airplanes there. The people there are incredible. Obviously the Hintons, I've actually met them both there, and to see the airplanes and everything. But I think one of the most fascinating things that I did at Planes of Fame was walking through their restoration area. Can you talk about that for just a moment?
Yeah, definitely. Their restoration hangar is always full. And that's one of the most unique things, and it's always open. It's one of the most unique things that you, as a patron, going and visiting Planes of Fame, is getting to see the maintenance hangar. It's not for static aircraft. It's not for aircraft just getting a new paint job and getting thrown back out on the museum floor. These aircraft are getting refurbished and being maintained to be flyable again, to do what they were meant to and designed to do. So that's one of the most unique aspects about going to this museum, is getting to see restored or being restored aircraft from years ago that are still being maintained and still flyable today. And it's one of the coolest things. And you'll see anything from the typical P-51. And if you go there recently, or anytime recently, you'll actually see Maverick's P-51, which is Tom Cruise's actual P-51 that he owns. He sends it to Planes of Fame to get maintained. It's a big storyline. If you want to go see his plane, it's there. They got his jacket and everything. It's a pretty cool thing to go and see. But you also get to see a lot of other really cool and very unique aircraft that you will never see ever anywhere else, or even in flyable conditions. They're number one aircraft that they have in their own personal collection, always out on the museum floor and flies once a year, is their Japanese Zero. Now, what makes their Zero so unique in comparison to some of the other Zeros that are still around and still flyable is that this Zero, owned by Planes of Fame, has its original engine. And listening to that engine start up and listening to the cylinders pound away and looking at all the gas and all the fumes that come out of those things and listening to it fly overhead is such a unique experience. Especially teaching and talking about naval aviation, we get people who also dress as Japanese pilots, and they offer up their knowledge about how Japanese pilots would go about operating these aircraft. And just being able to experience the aircraft itself, getting to see the real deal, getting to see that plane, and then also getting to hear the engine, getting to feel the rumble of the engine, smell that avgas burn off from it. It's such a unique experience being around a lot of these planes. And I would say one of the notable airplanes that just recently came out of maintenance and flew recently, say a couple months ago for the Central Coast Air Fest, was the Mosquito, the British Mosquito.
Oh,
and
one of my favorite airplanes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so now having two Mosquitoes flyable and flying information when they did for the Central Coast Air Fest was amazing. It's again, one of those once in a lifetime opportunities to see these two aircraft together flying information for an event that is unique in every regard, not just to those two aircraft, but to all the aircraft that either come and visit or that's in Planes of Fame's collection or in other people's collections. It's a phenomenal event. Those are some phenomenal planes. Those are some beautiful sounding planes. Having those twin Merlin engines in there and those two roaring overhead, I'm sure was an absolute experience. Unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to go this past year. But if they're going to be doing stuff like this again, I will absolutely be out there enjoying those things.
Yeah. I understand. If I'm not mistaken, Planes of Fame is currently restoring a P-61 Black Widow. Is that correct?
I believe so. There's been multiple aircraft coming in and out of their maintenance hangar. if it's part of their long-term projects, which they do have a number of long-term projects that they've been working on, isn't always on the maintenance floor.
Yeah, you've mentioned two of my all-time favorite airplanes, Max, is the Mosquito and the P-61. When I was a kid, a teenager, I dreamt of and would actually go sit in a chair and like chair fly, like I was flying in a Mosquito or a P-61 Black Widow. But everybody's favorite's always the P-51. It's got its own sound. Everybody knows when it's coming. Everybody knows when it goes by because of the Merlin engines, and of course the whistle of the airplane that it makes when it's going through the air. But the Mosquito was just a phenomenal airplane. It did so much, and I'm so glad that Planes of Fame took that upon themselves to do that. And a matter of fact, I think on YouTube there's a video of Steve Hinton's the father flying that thing around for like the first time. And I imagine, he probably takes all the new ones up out of the barn, right off the maintenance floor. But what an incredible job that would be, fun for him to do that and fly that stuff around. So anyway, hey, we've been going for almost 2 hours, and I still have a couple of questions, so you don't mind sticking around for a little bit? Okay. All right. So I do that clapping thing to know that that's a piece that I will cut out. Okay. Where I'm asking you questions and saying, oh, we're going to be almost for 2 hours. You called me and interviewed me, and I think it was for oh shoot, what's the group?
Flightline Media.
Flightline Media, yeah. And explain to people, and I'm sorry that name escaped me, because I talk to Andrew all the time or text him all the time. Explain your role with Flightline Media, because this is also a very fascinating thing that you do too, in the podcast world.
Yeah, so with Flightline Media, if you aren't familiar with it, it is a YouTube channel that currently does interviews and also does a little bit of model videos here and there, but primarily does interviews with veterans and military members who have very unique and interesting stories that you may or may not have heard about. And that's one of the unique things about what Flightline Media is doing, is offering up these stories and giving them free and available to anybody who chooses to watch these interviews. And it's a fantastic opportunity to learn something new about things that you may or may not have knew even existed. And it's one of the very unique opportunities that I've actually been given, actually by just doing my own presentations and my own bit of history research and whatnot, and was finally recruited by Flightline Media and Andrew. And it's been really unique to listen to him have such a passion about wanting to get these interviews in and learning about different pilot experiences from all over the world and from all over different walks of life and experiences. It's been fantastic, and I've only been working with him for a few months. And yeah, I mean, the way that I came about you here was because you're the first project he gave me, was to work on your video, which will be coming out hopefully soon, because I'm still working hard as I can to make sure I get your interview all right, because I think your story is phenomenal. It's an amazing story. It made me very curious about your story and wanting to talk to you more, and even getting to know you after listening to that interview, getting to know you a second time through the interview that we had was.
We talked for almost 2 hours. Do you realize that?
We still are talking.
I know, we're talking for 2 more.
Yeah, it's a fantastic opportunity, and if you're not familiar with it, Flightline Media on YouTube is a great place to learn about pilot experience from all over different aspects of aviation life. And I've really enjoyed working with them. There's a lot of really cool and upcoming projects. So we're trying to keep those in line and coming out more regularly. That's why he wanted to hire me on, so that way we can get more content out there and available to our listeners and viewers. So it's a lot of opportunities have come out of, I mean, after spending 8 years in living history, education, and aviation mindseted, it's been a real journey so far. And I'm only 25, so I still got plenty of life left in me to continue doing even more.
But it really tickles your history senses, doesn't it, to talk to some of these guys? Because Andrew's interviewed even some World War II guys, that are like in their late 90s now, and a lot of other people, like myself, and people think that my story is interesting, unique, until you like interview a P-47 pilot who flew in Europe, or something like that, and then you find out what real flying was about, and what real flying was, and you mentioned, talking instrument flying, instrument flying in World War II was crude, working off, radio signals and basically non-directional beacons and trying to find your base, back home and everything. I mean, just crazy stuff, So I'm glad that you took that on, because again, the thing that I love about doing this podcast is, of course, meeting the people that I interview, like you and others, that have these very unique stories, very connected to aviation, very connected to aviation history. But the people that have been in very unique events and very, sometimes very intense events, that where you're almost crying when you hear about, this Navy SEAL fell off the back of the helicopter and was executed and started a whole 17-hour battle, things like that. That's one of the things that I really enjoy about this, is meeting the people and hearing the stories, So, Max, how do people find you when they want you to come to an event and speak about this history stuff that World War II history and everything, where you get dressed up and get on stage and talk about this stuff? How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So on social media, I'm primarily active on Instagram. I do have a Facebook page, but I don't keep track of it as often. But I am primarily on Instagram, and I'm working on my YouTube presence. So that's something to look out for. I'm known as the Historical Aviator on both Instagram and on YouTube. I also have a website, which is historicalaviator.wordpress.com. That'll probably be in the description for you to be able to click on and go and explore. So I'm known as the Historical Aviator. That's my tag. And on my website, I talk about my presentations, the different levels of presentations I do, both education in history and in STEM. I'm working on more STEM-related projects this year, since most of my presentations have been focused primarily on history and education. So on my social media, on my Instagram is where I post a lot of where I'm at and what I'm doing. If you want to contact me, you can either go to the link on my bio in Instagram, and that will allow you to contact me directly, or you can go and visit my website and you can go to contact me, and that will allow you to send me an email, and I will respond to you as soon as I get it.
Perfect. That's great, because I think there's a lot of people that would love to have you, particularly go to his Instagram page, because you can see him, in the cockpits of some of these airplanes, all dressed up and everything too, which is just fantastic. Okay. Mm-hmm. So again, Max, thanks for coming on and being with us today. I really appreciate you being on the Lessons from the Cockpit show.
Happy to be here. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Folks, I really hope you enjoyed those lessons from Max, particularly helicopters. I want all of you instructors to take note of some of the things that he said, because I've had experience with good instructors who were unmotivating and made me want to quit. And of course, very motivating instructors who made me want to reach farther and farther in all of my goals. So I appreciate Max coming on. We're actually going to have Max on one more time, because there's a lot of the things that he speaks about on stage history-wise that I think is important. We did 2 hours here. We're probably going to do 2 hours again in about 3 weeks. So Max is going to come on again. This episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show is supported by Wall Pilot, custom aviation art for the walls of your home, office, or hangar, like the KC-135 you see above me. We print them 4, 6, and 8 feet on vinyl. They peel off and stick to any flat surface. They are weatherproof, we have found out. Extremely weatherproof, as a matter of fact. One has been on a backboard outside for going on 3 years now without any problems. There's 157 ready to print, 4, 6, and 8 foot, beautiful profiles, exhaustively researched, that you can pick from right now, and we can print them and send them to you. Or let us do a custom one for you and fill out the custom form. If you have a favorite airplane that you want a profile of sticking on your wall, like 8874 here behind me, my airplane when I was stationed at Kadena, then fill out the custom form and we'll put your name on it from your unit, the famous airplane that you want. We can even do weapons loads for most of the modern jets. So go to wallpilot.com and help support the channel. Also, I have a Patreon page now called the All Ranks Club. Please go by and you can join for free. But those of you that join at the designated driver and by the bar levels get one-on-one time with me through Zoom meetings. We're going to do group question and answer sessions. We're also going to do a Thursday virtual bar night where we all get together, get our favorite adult beverage of choice, and just talk aviation. So go to my Patreon channel if you want to support me. Also, if you just want to donate to the channel and to the show, I have the PayPal and the Venmo links in the description below, and you can just donate whatever you want. And we appreciate all of you that have done that. Several have been very generous. Thank you very much. And have been very generous on my YouTube channel with super thanks. So I thank all of you for doing that. Please go by, join my Patreon channel. I'm also on Discord at the All Ranks Club, where I have lessons learned, stories, pictures from all over, and of course, some pretty funny memes too. All Ranks Club, please come and join us. Next week, folks, on the Lessons from the Cockpit show, I'm going to talk about some of the things that have happened during my career. One of them kind of funny when I was in industry that I think you'll enjoy, because I went head to head in a simulator against 2 executive pilots who did not know my background. And it was very detrimental to their sim ride. And some other things that I want to talk about that are going on in the news, particularly with the wildfires and the heroic efforts of the helicopter and fixed wing pilots that have been fighting the fires, and of course, some of the current events going on around the world. So join me next week on what will be the 100th episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show. And please go by my Patreon All Ranks Club and join. Because remember, if you join at the designated driver and by the bar, you get pretty cool stickers. And like I said, these all peel off and you can stick them on the back of your computer, water bottles, any flat surface. And there's 10 of these, from World War II airplanes all the way up to, as you see, modern fighters. Thanks again, folks. I really appreciate all of you coming by my YouTube channel, my TikTok, and my Instagram. And we're doing very well. And I thank you very much, particularly the shorts that I do on YouTube. We're over 154 million views in 11 months and almost 210,000 subscribers just on YouTube alone. So thank you. Thank you for supporting this show. I'm Mark Hasara, the host of the Lessons from the Cockpit show, signing out. Sluggo out here.